In December 1983, we were zeicha to spend a few hours with Moran Hagoyin Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky Shlita, at which time we showed him our initial research along with our first videotape. We asked him how to proceed. His psak was that since at times Isurei D'Oraisa were involved, we were required to disseminate our findings to the public la'afrushe me'isura. This report is the outcome of that advice. My name is Pinchos Bodner. With me is Rabbi Shlomo Gissinger, Rosh Chabura in Beis Medrash Gavoa and a Paisik for the Lakewood community and beyond. Assisting us with editorial, technical, and directional support is Rabbi Yitzchak Sokol. In this report, we will cover 5 major points. Point number 1, the emerging problem. Recently, there has been an increasing presence of insects in vegetables coming to market. We will find out what's causing the problem and how extensive is it. Point number 2, are they visible? Insects that are not visible are not a kashrus problem. We will demonstrate that these insects are indeed very visible to the naked eye and therefore very truly a kashrus problem. Point number 3, which vegetables need inspection? We will report on specific vegetables such as lettuce, cabbage, and many others. The 4th point to be covered is halachos. The major halachic issues, as well as new psakim and tshuvos from Hagoyin Rav Moshe Feinstein Shlita, will be discussed. Point 5, techniques. We will demonstrate specific techniques for inspecting and preparing vegetables for use in a kosher home. Let's begin with the first point, the emerging problem. What do the experts say? In the United States, 2 of the leading institutes involved in entomological research are the University of California, Riverside, and Cornell University, Geneva, New York. At these centers, extensive research is being performed on all aspects of insect infestation. Dr. George A. Schaefer's, head of the Department of Entomology at Cornell, describes his facility.
Well, this is the New York State Agricultural Experiment Station. We are part of Cornell University. We probably contrast a little bit with the main campus of Cornell University in Ithaca in that we are really 100% research here at Geneva.
Excuse me for interrupting. Where does this facility rank insofar as size and stature among such type facilities? Are you only second to Riverside in California?
I think that might be a fair comparison.
Dr. Tony Shelton heads a research team at Cornell investigating cabbage and onions. Dr. Shelton is a known expert on thrips and has published numerous articles on thrips infestation of cabbage. The University of California is claimed to be the world's largest research facility on insects in vegetables and fruit crops. Dr. John Trumbull describes his facility at Riverside, California.
Varies from very basic research to very applied research. For the university itself, in response to your question, this is one of the smaller of the 11 campuses for the UC system, and I believe we only have about 5,000 to 6,000 students, a large proportion of which are graduate students. As the size of the university goes, the University of California itself is one of the larger research institutions and teaching institutions in the United States. Our department at UCR in entomology is perhaps one of the largest in the country, if not the largest. And generally, the last study that they ran showed that we are the most productive in terms of the number of publications per faculty. So we consider ourselves to be among the best research institutions in entomology in the country.
Dr. Nick Toscano, Director of Integrated Pest Management at the University of California, is well known for his expertise on lettuce and other crops. He has published many articles dealing with controlling insect infestation on lettuce. Why the emerging problem? Why aren't chemicals controlling insects as they have in the past? We asked our experts. Dr. Trumbull discusses why the insect generations are continually building more and more resistance to pesticides.
Spray a field with a pesticide, you may kill 99% of the insects in that field, but that last 1%, due to some genetic factor, is resistant. And that means that it is able to tolerate that pesticide at the rate that you put it on. It then reproduces, and as you've seen from my slideshow, they're capable of reproducing very rapidly. And then its progeny have that same genetic resistance. And so you build populations that are more and more resistant and more tolerant to pesticides. But what's happened, for instance, in a leaf miner case that Nick just mentioned, is that the leaf miner was exposed initially to DDT. It then went through all of the organophosphates, which were the next major group of pesticides that came in, through the chlorinated hydrocarbons, through into the synthetic pyrethroids, and even into today's newer classes of compounds. And as they went through that cycle, we found that it began to develop resistance faster and faster. It started out that you could last 10 or 12 years with a compound, and then the last compound that went through was permethrin, a synthetic pyrethroid of the first generation, and it lasted 6 months.
Wow. Can we control infestation levels by applying more insecticides? We asked our experts. Doctors Trumbull, Toscano, and Shelton reply.
This does occur. It's been documented where when you apply a material, an insecticide for control of an insect, that less than 1% of that material actually gets to the site, and something like a 10% of that total material may get to the target, which is the insect. And that's one of the areas, too, that it affords some sort of protection, and especially in places like California, where they'll fly with an airplane to go 5 to 10 gallons of water, maybe 20 if they go per acre, maybe 20 if they go to the helicopter. That material just a lot of times won't penetrate in those areas.
Dr. Trumbull explains that since insecticides are not totally effective and poisonous to humans, the experts are currently recommending reduced levels of insecticides.
Increased. Right now, we think we're just about at the maximum number of pesticide applications that should ever be considered, because Right, right. We are putting on so many applications now to present the consumer with a virtually perfect product in terms of damage, that if we went out to control every possible organism that was going to occur on that plant, starting with thrips, we have to double our applications. We think we could present the consumer with an acceptable product with 50% or less of the applications that we currently use, if they'd be willing to tolerate a little bit more damage. Now, they'd probably have to tolerate more thrips numbers in there at the same time.
Dr. Shelton of Cornell explains that federal regulations take into account the impossibility of eliminating insects.
The regulations that FDA has made, where they have their defect action levels, they realize that from their standpoint there's no such thing as a totally insect-free product. And so they try and put some regulation on it, say, you know, look, we don't want it to be really dirty. Here's some standards that we'll go for. And even if you spray, you know, every day, if you spray your cabbage every day with a very toxic material, when you harvest that cabbage, you would still, if you look hard enough, find some thrips.
Is there anything that can happen that would eliminate thrips as a problem, say, for instance, in a given year or a given crop?
Eliminate them or reduce them?
No, eliminate them.
Nuclear war.
Out of 100 heads of lettuce at launch, how many of those heads would you assume will have one or more thrips or aphids or any type of insect?
Well, I'd have to say, and I know we discussed this before, and I was surprised when you asked me one time before, you said, well, what do you think a percentage of lettuce gets in the market that's damaged? And I said, well, somewhere between 5 and 10%. That was using my methods, visual inspection, looking at the thing, and I was considering the physiological disease and insects. And okay, and I've been through this. Now, talking to people, investigating this a little bit further, I think every head of lettuce would probably have some, would have thrips. And I think in your area where you have some dust, you might have a mite or two. And I don't, because we see thrips in lettuce out in the field all the time. When you're inspecting, you'll see adults. And it could be the coldest part of our growing season in Imperial Valley in December, for example. And so I would suspect that you would not, in any way, shape, or form, not have any thrips in there.
And after this study, it's 100% that have some thrips in there. But it's not what we would normally consider to be a
right,
problem.
I understand, right. But your thresholds, again, as we said earlier, being different than ours. So basically we're saying that seasons, although would bring down the number considerably, but would not rid the heads entirely from some thrips.
No.
In summary, we have seen that the use of insecticides is not a reliable solution to ensure insect-free vegetables to the kosher consumer. The scientists corroborate our own findings that large percentages of vegetables are now coming to the market containing insects. The next point to be covered is, are these insects visible to the naked eye? In fact, these insects are visible to the naked eye. However, a person that has had no training or instruction will have great difficulty identifying them. During the past year, many of the B'nai Kollel here in Lakewood have assisted us in our experiments. They have had no difficulty seeing the insects without the aid of magnification once it has been pointed out to them. The insects affecting us are thrips and aphids. Pictured here is a live thrips on lettuce purchased in a local supermarket. Aphids, on average, range in size from 2 millimeters, that's slightly more than a 1/16 of an inch, up to 5 millimeters, slightly more than an 1/8 of an inch. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, most thrips are 1.5 to 3 millimeters in size. That's about a 1/16 of an inch, the smallest being 0.6 of a millimeter in size. We will shortly demonstrate what this means in terms of visibility. Thrips can be found on vegetables in all stages of growth. Shown here, starting with the egg, are the various stages of growth called larvae. The emerging thrips larvae is approximately 0.2 of a millimeter in size. Dr. North, one of the specialists on thrips at Cornell, comments on the visibility of these larvae.
With the appropriate background, you know what you're looking for, and we can assume the thrips larvae of about 1/10 or 2/10 of a millimeter in size.
How can we relate to the insect size of 1 to 2 millimeters? On the face of a dollar bill, down in the right-hand corner, you'll find the words Series 1981. If you measure the 1 in Series 1981, you'll find it to be 1 millimeter long and less than 0.2 wide. This 1 is about the size of an adult thrips and smaller than an aphid. Look at the words Washington, D.C. The periods in D.C. are 1/4 of a millimeter, the size of newborn thrips larvae. Pictured here is a thrips found on a scallion. Scallions often contain thrips larvae. In this scene, we remove a dead thrips from a scallion. This specimen is placed on a dollar bill for size comparison. We clearly see that our thrips specimen is comparable to the 1 in the dollar bill. Shown here are aphids removed from the lettuce. These specimens are fully grown adult aphids. Here is an aphid youngster, located on the same lettuce leaf. In summary, we have seen that the insects at issue, thrips and aphids, with proper inspection, can be seen by people with average eyesight without the aid of magnifying glasses, microscopes, or the like.
Although the Shulchan Aruch does not give an exact size for the minimum share of insects which are asur, the many poskim who do discuss it agree that the shear is the smallest size visible in direct sunlight to the naked eye. One of those poskim, Rabbi Yitzchak Lamperante, the Pachad Yitzchak, was personally involved in the year 1721 in a project to make the public more aware of insects and their vegetables. He writes, quote, "Even those insects which are barely visible to the naked eye are nevertheless asur min haTorah." Later poskim also concur with him. Among them, the Aruch HaShulchan writes in Siman Pei Dalet Sif Lamed Vav, after first asserting that microscopic insects are not asur, quote, "However, those insects which are visible to the naked eye, even if only in direct sunlight, and even if extremely minuscule, dak min hadak, are included in the Isser of Shratzin." I was zeicher to have 2 sessions with Moran Hagoin Reb Moshe Feinstein Shlita, during which I asked many shaylos on the topic of Telayim. At one of those sessions, Rav Moshe paskined
that even if to the naked eye only a spot without legs is visible, however, with external aids, one can verify that the spot is indeed an insect, then that insect is also considered visible to the naked eye and is thus asur midoraisa. Lefi zeh, we can clearly state that lahalacha, thrips, aphids, and their larvae, even if extremely minuscule, provided that they are visible to the naked eye of a person with average eyesight, are asur. These insects are asur to all people, even to those who cannot see them due to their weak eyesight.
This brings us to the third point in our report, discussing some of the vegetables which require inspection prior to use. The first vegetable on our agenda is lettuce. Back in the fall of 1983, we started our investigation into lettuce in Lakewood. Our objective was to purchase California iceberg lettuce grown in the central coastal area and Imperial Valley areas of California. We would purchase the lettuce over a period of time sufficient to encompass all of the various growing seasons. During the course of our investigation, we were aided by many of the members of the Lakewood Yeshiva community. The University of California chartered a plane to fly us from Riverside Airport to the central coastal area. Dr. Toscano accompanied us as our guide.
10 degrees right and left traffic security and not from the west. We're straight into 9.
Okay, I'll offset right.
0 5. First flight tower, 29 Whiskey, ready for takeoff. Commander, 29 Whiskey, taxi. Position on hold to the direction of the square. Towards the east, thank you. Right downward departure approved.
This is why we started with the team, so we have a lot of laptop all over.
Our flight path took us over the San Gabriel Mountains and the San Rafael Mountains towards the central coastal growing areas. Our flight landed at Santa Maria Airport.
All the lettuce is cut by hand.
Okay, 20 Papa, turn right into taxiway, contact ground, 0.9 or off the runway.
We were met at the airport by a representative of Santa Barbara County Agricultural Department. We were taken on a tour of the lettuce and broccoli growing areas, where a lettuce harvest is now in progress. Assisting Dr. Toscano in our tour is Mr. Marvin Snyder, farm advisor from the University of California, responsible for providing scientific and technical advice to the growers.
Yeah, we're going to take you to naked back too, so he'll explain it a little better.
Okay.
This is the trim for food service lettuce. 6 heads to a bag. There'll be 4 bags for a carton, which equals 24 heads, and it'll weigh approximately 34 to 36 pounds.
Adding his expertise is the general manager of Harvest
That's what we call
Tech,
closely trimmed.
one of the world's largest harvesters of lettuce. Although the grower has used large amounts of insecticides, he must inspect for insect damage while harvesting. Some types of insects are readily visible in the field.
Here's the bead armyworm.
And this is noticed in the field and left behind.
And here's another. Is this another one?
Yes.
Yeah, they're all bead armyworm. Generally, see, they showed you yesterday how they lay their eggs in an egg mass.
Yes,
So
right.
generally, you'll get the bead armyworm. They'll stay on top. Well, they'll go in egg mass. Eventually, they'll move down and they'll start moving through the field. And you may not be able to discover them. Sometimes that happens. They come underneath the head. When they get larger, they'll move. They call them armyworms.
Here, I got it.
They'll move.
Close enough to
I
get
got
bit.
it. I got it.
He's performing for us.
Smaller insects are a problem to the growers only when present in large enough numbers to cause damage to the plant.
In a field, you're generally looking for all defects or insects, and depending on the time that are visible, and depending on the time of the year, depends on what you're looking for. If you're down south in the springtime where it's hot, you'd be looking for a lot of thrip damage, lagus damage, desert-type insects that come off of the brush and into the fields because it's green and has moisture.
One of the reasons is thrips, their mouth parts, they're rasping, and they'll take, like I explained yesterday, they'll take that top epidermis layer off, so you will get a stain or a scarring of it. It looks kind of rusty. Now the aphid itself, it just, what it will do, it can in one spot sink its mouth parts into the phloem and just stay there and feed there. And it's like a hypodermic needle, so there's no real outside discoloration.
The general manager of Harvest Tech demonstrates how lettuce is harvested.
Then you place the knife at the base of it, and cut it, and turn it over. As he turns it over, he'll trim off these base leaves. And then the front cutters on one of these machines would place it on the bed.
That is an oil refinery.
Yeah.
They have a big sugar mill in this area. Basically. Pump it.
They'll call it the coke plant. That's in black out there called coke.
Oh, is it?
The lettuce is now packed and shipped to local markets with no washing or inspection. Wayne shows us how the federal and county inspectors look for major leaf damage by checking one carton from the entire field. The inspectors are looking for major plant damage, including damage caused by insects. Inasmuch as some small insects are unavoidable, the inspector is not concerned with their presence.
How would they inspect? How would a federal inspector inspect for insect damage?
It would be all. It would be all visual. He would look under the leaves. He'll peel the leaves back. A federal inspector might bust the whole carton, as the same as a county or state inspector.
All right, but on one head, how would he inspect one single head?
Let me get one here with a few things on it. Okay, a federal inspector will pick a head out of the carton like this. He'll look at it, turn it over, lay the leaves back, look for any obvious insects or any damage.
Did he look under any light, any flash?
There's no lights. It's all right here in the field without any
magnifying glass.
No magnifying glass. Then a federal inspector, most of the time, will repack the carton. He'll look at it and then place the head back into the carton.
Does he open up the head and look into the core, down to the core?
He will bust a percentage of heads per lot just to make sure that there's no internal defects.
That's how he looks it over, or does he take every leaf and...
No, time-wise, it doesn't permit to go and look at each leaf.
So you just get this very general overview.
A general overview of what's out there. Then they can bust and pour out like this. I was a federal inspector years ago myself.
The next item on our agenda is broccoli. We were driven to a large broccoli field a few minutes away.
This plant's probably 90 days, something like that, at least in that area. But the flower is just beginning, barely not even an inch in diameter on there.
The florets are what he's calling the flower, is what we call the florets part of the plant. If you want to zoom in on there, you'll be able to get the little very tightly pressed florets.
Yeah, we call them beads. Yeah, each individual bead, they're in the trade, they're called beads.
They're called beads.
When would the insects start to arrive on them? At that stage, at the bead stage?
Insects could be on this plant was just coming out of the ground, but as far as the head or the part we would eat, sure, it's possible that you could have aphids on here now, but normally it's when they get on a little bigger, like this head here.
Yeah.
And
how much older is this head? This already looks more closer to the type that the consumer would end up getting.
It'll probably take this, from this size to this one, it'll probably take a week and a half, 2 weeks to mature this much more.
I see.
As they mature...
Nick, would you like to add something about infestation?
I think Marvin said it all, because what happened is that you can get them on any... Telling what you do, and the plant is small, you get loopers feeding on the outside, cabbage loopers feeding on the outside of the leaves, you get diamondback on the leaves. And
how about thrips and aphids?
Thrips and aphids, well, aphids will come in like they come in any stage, and then when the head starts to mature, they'll be close to the head. Especially aphids, you get a few around there, because they're, like John said, they're going after the free amino acids, growing point. But thrips could move in when they would be a bigger problem if they're going to be on broccoli. They like the flowers, and they'll move into the florets and beads.
But could they get into it? This seems to be pretty tightly
Definitely,
wrapped.
yes. Thrips can get into that very easily.
Let me get a knife and I'll cut this and show it a bit.
Yes. See, especially with the thrips, the dogs will lay their eggs down in there also in the bud.
The eggs are laid in there?
Yeah, and the nymphs will be
they have
right
it
in
over
there.
the deposit?
Yeah, they'll back up and they'll put it, well, they could put in between the cracks, you know. It's not that they'll lay on top. They're very hard to say. Yeah, they could lay them anywhere. See, where there's ever a space, because this, to us, looks like, there's no room, it's tight, but not for thrips.
Do you have a fully matured plant there, Mark?
See if there's one further along.
One here that's a little far along. It still hasn't loosened up a little bit. Yeah, there's one.
This would be one that's
ready for harvest
and be ready for harvest.
And you could see the thrips could get in there very easily. Now it's starting to loosen up.
The way we would do this, then these would be broken off. All of these.
This is discarded, or
those would be discarded. And you'd end up with a head like this, and you want about this length. And then one place that the aphids get is up inside here. And worms. That's where they're really difficult or impossible to control.
And in there's thrips, right in the...
And what about in the beads?
Usually you don't see too much problem in the beads themselves. As far as feeding on the beads, they get up inside here. It seems to be more tender, more protected. See the younger beads in there. But you can see the individual beads now. Just each one of those.
Suppose they put more insecticide on the in the fields on the broccoli. Would that can they get it to a point where they could control it to zero?
I feel it never could.
Located a few minutes away in the heart of the broccoli growing area, we visited one of the largest broccoli processing plants in the world. This plant produces frozen broccoli for most of the major brands in America. Fresh broccoli is delivered to the factory by the truckload and loaded into this shaker. the broccoli heads get shaken and continues into the factory. This machine has 5/8 of an inch holes through which small pieces of broccoli fall along with dirt, worms, beetles, and other debris. The smaller pieces are then sifted to remove the foreign particles. The remaining pieces move to a conveyor belt and into the factory. After being shaken, the whole head is then trimmed by hand and cut into spears. This step of trimming the broccoli by hand is the first of 4 processing steps. After the broccoli is cut up, it goes through 3 more steps. 1, the broccoli is washed. 2, it is blanched. That means it's pre-cooked by steaming. 3, it is packed for the freezer. This factory is so large, it has 3 different processing lines running simultaneously. Line number 1, line number 2, and line number 3. After trimming, the spears are moved by conveyor belt through a washing machine. The water is kept moving by means of revolving drum or cold water sprays. Each washer then leads into a blancher directly behind it. The broccoli moves through the blancher where it is steamed for 3 minutes. After being blanched for 3 minutes, the broccoli moves by conveyor belt to the packing area, where it is packed for various manufacturers under different brand labels. Most of this plant's production is for national brands. During the process, the Quality Control Department monitors the factory to ensure that its own quality standards are met. The government also has standards that must be satisfied. Everything practical is done to ensure that nothing falls into the product to contaminate it, and that contaminants on the broccoli are removed by shaking and washing. The government recognizes that small insects, such as thrips, aphids, and mites, are present in the broccoli, and that it is not humanly possible to remove these insects in the processing. Under the government guidelines, these insects are labeled unavoidable defects. Mr. Tony Rica is the quality control manager of the entire factory. We asked Mr. Rica what are the levels permitted in broccoli for thrips, aphids, and mites.
But there being an unavoidable defect, there are tolerances. Basically, FDA tolerances are public. They're not really public. What is this for?
To repeat Mr. Rica's words, if you couldn't hear him over the noise, quote, "There being an unavoidable defect, our tolerances are basically FDA tolerances, which are not published," end quote. Mr. Rica, being the official word on quality control in this plant, was telling us that broccoli coming out of this factory will have thrips and aphids up to the FDA tolerance level. We were able to obtain these government standards, which are readily obtainable from the United States Department of Agriculture. 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of frozen broccoli is permitted to contain up to 60 aphids, thrips, and mites. Back in the fall of 1983 in Lakewood, we began testing broccoli. By January of 1985, we have tested well over 100 packages throughout the various growing seasons. The vast majority of packages tested contained insects. Most prevalent was the thrips. Also common, but not as prevalent, was a type of aphid called cabbage aphid. Dr. Trumbull offers a scientific explanation as to the presence of aphids and thrips in broccoli. This slide shows cabbage aphids on an emerging broccoli floret.
Growth point of the plant. Now in broccoli, this will become the head, and already the cabbage aphids have begun to aggregate in this location.
When you say the head, you mean the floret part?
This would be for the floret, for the inflorescence. For the cabbage plant, for instance, it would be down in the heart or at the center of the plant.
The center of the cabbage?
Yes, they'll feed, well, they feed in both locations, but they tend to prefer the meristematic tissue, which is the actively growing portion of the plant. And the reason for this is there's two locations where you get high levels of free amino acids in a plant. And free amino acids are what these insects are keying on. Most of the aphids like to feed on locations that will give them high nitrogen content that's accessible. Well,
Dr. Trumbull explains why thrips inhabit the broccoli florets.
Right, the microclimate is best for the organism. And because it's an inflorescence, it's probably more humid up there. And thrips are subject to dehydration, as many small soft-bodied insects are. And therefore, if they can survive in an area that's got slightly higher humidity or is more protected and cooler, then they'll do better.
Along with our research into lettuce and broccoli, we've conducted research into a number of other vegetables. Based on the criteria of Mir Hamatzui, the following vegetables also need inspection. In the lettuce family, iceberg lettuce, Boston lettuce, romaine lettuce, escarole lettuce, chicory lettuce, endives. In the cabbage family, regular cabbage, Savoy cabbage, Chinese cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli. In the herb family, curly parsley, regular parsley, dill, and celery. In the onion family, onions, both purple and regular, scallions and chives. Other vegetables include artichoke, asparagus, and spinach.
Which vegetables require Bedika inspection? The Shulchan Aruch Yoreh Deah, Siman Pei Dalet, states that a crop may not be eaten without inspection if a significant minority, termed Mir Hamatzui, of that crop contains insects. In situations where the majority of a crop is infested, the Bedika required is Min HaTorah. In those cases where only a Mir Hamatzui of the crop is infested, the Bedika required is Midrabanan. Although the Shulchan Aruch does not give an exact number for Mir Hamatzui, most poskim rely upon the opinion of the Mishknos Yaakov, who writes that 10% or more constitutes a Mir Hamatzui. Moran HaGaon Rabbi Moshe Feinstein Shlita rules, however, that Mir Hamatzui cannot be limited to that or any other specific amount. Rather, he says, if growers or other experts are aware of insect infestation in a crop, that crop requires Bedika. Regarding leaf vegetables, for example lettuce and cabbage, Moran HaGaon Reb Moshe Feinstein Shlita writes in the Igros Moshe Yoreh Deah Siman Lamed Hey that where Bedika is required, each and every leaf must be inspected. Needless to say, both sides of each leaf should be inspected.
In a recent issue of the halachic journal Kashrus Currents, Purim 1984, Harav HaGaon Rav Moshe Heinemann Shlita, Rav of Agudas Yisrael of Baltimore, expressed his halachic opinions on the subject of insects and vegetables. He first states that where small insects like thrips are present on vegetables such as lettuce and cabbage, such vegetables may not be eaten without a thorough inspection. He writes that there are more prohibitions in the Torah about eating thrips than there are about eating hog meat. Our own findings support this ruling regarding cabbage and lettuce. There is, however, one important point expressed which unfortunately does not correspond to our own findings. Harav Heinemann Shlita contends that the insects in broccoli, spinach, and most other vegetables are not readily visible and can only be located by first soaking the vegetable in water. He follows with a lengthy discourse on the Hilchos Taruvis and Bittul and concludes that these type of vegetables are halachically permitted without inspection. With regard to his premise that insects on spinach and most other vegetables are virtually impossible to detect by looking at them carefully, this is regrettably not the case, as is easily verifiable by visual inspection. To demonstrate this, we purchased fresh California spinach and took it to the Beis Medrash. The Kollel members were able to notice the insects with no difficulty.
Here's a nice long worm over here.
Here are close-ups of the insects found on these spinach leaves. Although spinach is more difficult to inspect than many other vegetables, nevertheless, it is possible to readily detect insects on the leaves as shown here.
With regard to Rav Heinemann's interpretation of the Hilchos Bittul, upon which he bases his decision, I spent much time during my session with Moran HaGaon Rav Moshe Feinstein Shlita on July 6, 1984, discussing this question in depth. Rav Moshe's psak was that even if the insects are not readily visible and are only visible after first soaking the vegetable in water, they are nevertheless not batel and are aser midoraisa. We also discussed these halachas with other Gedolei HaPoskim, including Harav HaGaon Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita. They too concurred that such insects are aser midoraisa. Therefore, we do include broccoli, spinach, etc. among those vegetables requiring inspection. A transcript of our discussions with Moran HaGaon Rav Moshe Feinstein Shlita and the written tshuvas which we received from Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita are currently being prepared for release. What is the din if a vegetable which requires bedika was cooked without its bedika? For example, if cabbage was cooked without bedika in a thick sauce by someone who was unaware that cabbage requires bedika. The Shulchan Aruch Yeridea, Siman Pei Dalet Sif Tes states that if a vegetable which requires bedika was cooked without it, if one is still able to recognize and remove the insects, the food is not mutter until the insects are removed. However, if the insects are unrecognizable and unremovable, the food is permitted as is. In our example, where the cabbage was cooked in a thick sauce, had the cabbage contained insects, they would now be mixed into the sauce and unrecognizable and unremovable. We have stated 3 points which must be met in order to permit the cooked food b'di'evet. 1. It was cooked b'shoigeg, unintentionally. That is, the person was unaware of his bedika requirement. In a case where he cooked the food in order to avoid inspection, he may not eat that food. 2. The cooked food is one in which the insects are unrecognizable. And 3. Unremovable. What constitutes unrecognizable and unremovable? How much effort must one expend in examining the mixture before the insects may be considered unrecognizable? How much time must be spent in trying to remove the insects? These and many other halachic considerations require the judgment of a Rav whenever vegetables are unintentionally cooked without inspection. The Shulchan Aruch Yeridea states that insects stored for 12 months are not prohibited because they are inert and as dust. This applies only when the infested produce was not preserved in its natural state by freezing, canning, vacuum packing, or any other means. Dehydrated products are stored without preservation for long periods of time, sometimes longer than a year. In addition, dehydrated products undergo a process which includes chopping, drying, and crushing. Insects which may have been present usually become annulled as a result of this process. Based on both of these factors and the halachic ruling of spek sveika, dehydrated products such as parsley flakes, onion flakes, oregano, etc. may be used without question. Powdered products such as onion powder and pureed products such as baby food strained spinach are so finely ground that any insects which may have been present would definitely have become annulled. Thus, these products present no kashrus problem.
Even though we have learned that many vegetables contain insects, this does not mean that we must refrain from eating these vegetables. What it does mean is that we must become familiar with techniques to render these vegetables kosher for use. The easiest approach to the problem is to use a reliable method of removing the insects from the vegetable. For hard-surfaced vegetables, such as celery, the best method is to thoroughly brush the surface with a vegetable brush or any suitable brush under running water. Since the insects are removed with this brushing, there is no longer any need for inspection. Another approach to the problem is to prevent the insects from coming into contact with the food to be eaten. For example, herbs such as parsley or soup greens, which are added to soups for flavor or nutrition, may be placed in a gourmet bag, which is tied well and cooked in the soup. This method allows the flavor and nutrition to pass through into the soup while retaining both the parsley and whatever insect it might have contained. This method is permitted as outlined by the Primi Gadim, Simin Tuf Nun Gimel, Sifkat Gimel, and the Pischei Tshuva, Simin Tzadi Tes. For leafy vegetables, there are no easy substitutes that we have found to date other than to inspect each and every leaf. The keys to proper inspection are good lighting, knowledge of what to look for, and some experience. The ability to properly inspect a leaf vegetable is an acquired skill. As with any skill, continued practice will eventually make the procedure much less inconvenient and more natural. The best way to learn how to properly inspect is to be shown by someone who is already proficient and accurate in the skill of inspection. If someone has not been shown what to look for, they may inadvertently, constantly overlook insects. If no one is available from whom to learn, it is possible to train yourself. Towards that end, we are preparing a brief guide on self-training. Proper lighting is crucial for inspecting leaf vegetables. The lighting should be situated so as to illuminate the leaf from the back. This type of lighting is vastly superior to top lighting. Objects that are virtually unnoticeable with top lighting are quite noticeable with through-the-leaf lighting. Holding the leaf up to the sun or in front of a light bulb are good occasional methods of through-the-leaf lighting. A more convenient and more accurate method is inspecting with a light box. The lettuce leaf can be placed directly on it and inspected while one is seated and in comfort, and the light is consistent and even. A practical suggestion is to use a large-size plastic food storage container with a translucent lid. Place one or two small fluorescent fixtures into the container. A round fluorescent fixture is also very suitable. Replace the lid, and the food storage container is now a relatively inexpensive vegetable leaf illuminator box. One should be able to discern all the fine details, as well as any foreign matter or insects on the illuminated leaf. The advantages of through-the-leaf illumination is strikingly visible in this demonstration. This lettuce leaf is illuminated by conventional lighting. The live aphid, being close in color to the lettuce leaf, offers little contrast and is hard to see. When the light box is turned on, the illumination provided offers a dramatic contrast between the aphid and the lettuce leaf, which is its host. Of the lettuce types, iceberg is the easiest to prepare for kosher use. Each leaf must be washed and inspected thoroughly, preferably with through-the-leaf lighting. One should look for aphids and thrips on the outer leaves, and mainly thrips on the inner leaves. The Boston lettuce leaves are more open than the iceberg head and are therefore prone to greater aphid levels. Each leaf must be thoroughly washed and inspected. Romaine, escarole, and chicory grow completely open rather than in heads, and are generally heavily infested with aphids and many other insects. The best way to use romaine for murrer is to cut the leafy matter off and wash and brush the stalks under water carefully. Although many cabbage leaves are clean, nevertheless, some thrips may be located somewhere in the head.
All the varieties that we looked at, you find thrips. And there are thrips. As I turn this up, there are lots of thrips I see running around here, all right, adults.
Dr. Trumbull of Riverside has been accumulating data for us on the distribution of insects throughout the cabbage head. He prepared for us these computer-generated charts indicating the distribution of insects within the cabbage head. Notice that about 25% of the thrips were found in the inner leaves. Since there is no telling where thrips might be on the cabbage head, every leaf must be inspected. Savoy cabbage is somewhat more difficult to inspect properly due to the textured surfaces of the leaf. Chinese cabbage leaves are more open than regular head cabbage and are therefore prone to greater insect infestation levels. Each leaf must be carefully checked and washed. However, if one would like to avoid inspection, one may do so by cutting off the leafy matter, like so, and washing and brushing the stalks thoroughly. In this manner, the Chinese cabbage may be used without an inspection completely. An ingenious way to enjoy coleslaw and other cabbage dishes without any inspection whatsoever is to use kohlrabi, a cabbage substitute. The kohlrabi may be washed off, shredded, and used for coleslaw without prior inspection. Harav Moshe Weisshlita of Yerushalayim, a noted expert in Hilchas Teilayim, recommends a method for preparing cabbage for use in cooked foods without inspection. Remove the outer few leaves. Place the cabbage into the freezer until frozen solid. Then defrost the cabbage. Wash each leaf carefully under running water, especially the folds and crevices. The leaves should be visually inspected the first few times and periodically thereafter to verify the thoroughness of one's washing. Brussels sprouts are often very highly infested and may not be used without a thorough inspection of each leaf. A proper inspection of the many leaves of the little head is both tedious and time-consuming, making it highly impractical. Parsley and dill are often infested, and inspection of them is impractical. They may, however, be used in a gourmet bag as demonstrated previously. Although celery needs inspection, it can be made fit for kosher use without any inspection whatsoever. Cut and trim the leaves off the stalk. Brush the stalk well. The stalks may now be used. The remaining leaves may be used for soups and the like by placing them in a gourmet bag. Onions have been found to contain the onion's thrips on the outer surface leaves of the onions. This does not present a problem since they don't normally enter the meat of the onion. The proper way to prepare onions is, first, cut off both ends and remove the loose skin as one would normally prepare an onion. The only extra step that must be taken is to make sure that the loose skin is removed and that the onion surface is washed well before using. As an extra precaution, it is advisable to remove the first layer of onion meat and rinse it and the onion before using. When Rabbi Falk, author of Madrich Lebedikas Terloim, first wrote to me to inform me that scallions often contain thrips, I must confess that I was somewhat skeptical. Shortly thereafter, however, I was shown thrips on scallions, and after much investigation can verify that indeed, in most bunches of scallions, 1 or 2 scallions will usually contain thrips larvae.
Place to find. All right, look at there. We open this up. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 larvae, 12, 13, 14, 15. You know, we just count on and on. Here.
The scallions serve as a breeding area for thrips in their earliest stages. Indeed, scientists breed thrips for laboratory use in the scallion-like part of the onion plant. These immature thrips are approximately the size of the period of the DC on the dollar bill and are hard to see due to their light green color. A scallion consists of 3 sections: the bulb, the tubular area, and the upper stalks. Rabbi Falk writes that the clean bulb may be cut off and used as is. The upper stalks, that green hollow area, may be cut off about 1 inch above the junction area. We advise that they be slit open lengthwise, rinsed well on both sides. Details of how to use the junction tubular area can be found in Rabbi Falk's halachic guide. However, the procedure needed may prove difficult and tedious for most people. Aphids and other insects are often present in artichokes. Each leaf, down to the solid core matter, must be inspected.
What happens when you get before this fern, you know, you have the asparagus head that you eat, but this is generally, you will find any of them in underneath these scales. That's for protection.
Dr. Toscano explains that the thrips are found not only in the head area of the asparagus, but also under the scales, where they go for protection. Asparagus can be prepared with a regular vegetable peeler. Remove all the loose parts on the tip and all the scales from the sides. Rinse under running water and use. We are unable to recommend any reliable method of inspecting or removing insects from broccoli florets. We can, however, recommend a method of using broccoli as an ingredient in kugels, quiche, or casserole. Trim off the florets and discard them. Trim the stems well and wash and brush them. The stems can be brushed and then sliced and used as a side dish or in a casserole, or it can be ground or blended and used into kugels, quiche, or other similar dishes. Regarding the use of florets as an ingredient in kugels and the like, according to the ruling from Moran Hagoyin Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita, the florets may be used in the following manner. First, trim off the florets and chop apart. Then, soak for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. Agitate and wash thoroughly. Then, cook until soft. Then, puree finely in a blender or food processor. The resultant puree may then be used. According to some poskim, this procedure is not permitted due to ein mevatlan isur lechatchila. Hagoyin Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita, in a written tshuva, rules that this is permitted. It should be noted that washing and cooking is only sufficient when followed by pureeing. A number of ideas have been unsuccessfully tried by kosher food packagers in an effort to produce insect-free broccoli. Recently, a frozen broccoli product was introduced advertising that it was kosher and also muchzik bali toiloim. After reaching the market, consumers found insects in each package, typically 11 to 16 aphids per box. The company subsequently published instructions for removing the insects by washing and cooking. Regrettably, it was found that even these techniques proved unsuccessful in removing all the insects. Fresh spinach can be checked in the manner described for leaf vegetables. It should be carefully inspected as it is commonly infested. Frozen spinach, being limp, is nearly impossible to inspect in the proper manner that it requires. Frozen spinach may be used as an ingredient in kugels, mashed potatoes, and the like, according to the ruling of Moran Hagoyin Rabbi Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita, previously stated. First, soak the spinach for 10 to 15 minutes, agitate and wash thoroughly, then remove and cook for approximately 10 minutes. Place in a blender and puree well for about 2 or 3 minutes. As mentioned previously, not all poskim agree, and this method is only permissible with pureeing. Fresh spinach may not, however, be used in this manner. Since a visual inspection is possible, pureeing without inspection would constitute bittul isur lechatchila. Many vegetables may be used without any inspection. Some of the more common vegetables which do not need inspection are alfalfa sprouts, bean sprouts, beets, carrots, corn kernels, cucumbers, eggplants, knob celery, kohlrabi, mushrooms, American grown, parsnips, peas, potatoes, pumpkins, radishes, squash, sweet potatoes, tomatoes, turnips, zucchini. Needless to say that any vegetable showing signs of rotting or having wormholes should be checked, and that all vegetables should be rinsed before using. Our data on the following vegetables is inconclusive at the present time: cauliflower, corn on the cob, leeks, mushrooms, imported, red cabbage. These vegetables, along with other vegetables perhaps omitted, may require inspection. This report discusses vegetables only. It does not include other products such as fruits, berries, grains, etc., some of which might also require inspection. What's in store for the future? Scientists are constantly searching for new insecticide and biological controls that are more effective against insects while at the same time less harmful to humans. At Cornell and other agricultural research centers, scientists are searching for those strains and species of vegetables which are naturally insect resistant. At the University of California, a technique was developed to remove thrips and mites from cabbage and lettuce leaves. This experimental device uses a combination of high-pressure air, chemical surfactants, and circulating water. Indications are that this type of device might be effective in rendering cabbage and lettuce fit for kosher use without further inspection. Further research and development is needed and will hopefully prove beneficial to the kosher food industry. In addition to having had the schus of hearing psakim directly from Moran Hagoyin Rav Moshe Feinstein Shlita, we were zeicha to receive written shuvas from Moran Hagoyin Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Shlita to many shilas pertinent to this report. Subsequently, we reviewed our research with other Rosh Yeshivas and Poskim and sought their comments and advice. Harav Hagoyin Rav Shimon Schwab Shlita, Rav of Kahal Adas Yeshurun, writes, "To those who claim that these insects are microscopic, this is not so. These insects are visible and can be seen by a trained eye. Many types of vegetables eaten in the homes of Yirei Hashem contain insects which are visible, Rachmana litzlan, b'miyud hamotzi.